the BBC announced, when was it? Sort of late autumn, wasn't it? 2025. That, sure enough, just as we told you, the best part of a year earlier, its global streaming deal with Disney Plus for Doctor Who was ending, to the surprise of virtually no one. Yeah, the party's over. Sorry, Belinda. Party's over, love. We never got to see her shake her stuff. Oh dear. Robbed. Absolutely robbed. But more importantly, the least convincing love-in ever, I think, in the history of international co-productions between BBC Studios and Disney Plus, that was over in a pretty big way. The truth of the matter was that the whole deal had started falling apart almost right away. We'd been tipped off about this at Type 40, literally in real time at the time during the 60th anniversary business. But, we do, generally speaking, we're an optimistic bunch. That's how this whole show and brand is put together. And so, how much do you believe of that you're told? The 60th anniversary itself was quite an exciting, heady time. And it wasn't just the 3 new specials that were premiering throughout that time. It did feel to some degree like fandom was coming together. We were all certainly enjoying each other's company, weren't we, Charlotte? And sort of reveling in 60 years worth of Doctor Who. So I didn't think it was right to just fixate on what could possibly go wrong when there was a lot to celebrate too.
Well, yeah, and bringing back that team of Tennant and David Tennant and Catherine Tate, having Russell back before all the stuff that happened later, it just felt like Doctor Who's coming home a little bit. I think that was the feeling in fandom a lot at that time.
Yeah, and we waited, didn't we, with bated breath for the revealing of just the titles of those specials. They held those back until just a few weeks before, didn't they? And I think we all kind of hoped it would eventually make some sort of sense, Gary. I think with the benefit of a couple of years' hindsight, it probably never did it? But this did recapture something, I think, for a little while in fits and starts.
Well, I think it brought a sense of anticipation that had been gone at that point for about like 5 years, with the Jodie era. And as Charlotte said, we didn't know what was coming, but, and they weren't, we didn't have a lot of details about the episodes, like what could Wild Yolanda be about, and the giggle, who could be coming back, when there was all the usual speculation about, past villains returning or special guests or whoever. And whenever there's a time where there's just a lot of like speculation going on, like that's what I think Doctor Who fans do well, which is like, who's coming back, which villain, and you get like a little screenshot, and then there's weeks of speculation about things like that. So yeah, I remember that.
During that couple of weeks, with Doctor Who fans, there was a lot that was winding us up here and there about those specials. But generally speaking, I think we came out of it with a lot more wind beneath our wings than we'd had in a couple of years, probably in 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so I think, and this wasn't just here on Type 40, I think collectively as a fandom, we did try to get behind everything and everyone associated with all new Doctor Who from Disney Plus and the BBC. Unknown quantities in Millie Gibson and Ncuti Gatwa themselves leading the show. A nervous excitement, I think, was circulating around the brand then, because we've seen unknowns or next to unknowns take the lead role in this before and become household names, revolutionize the show and bring people back and bring new people in. So that my feeling was, there's no reason why that couldn't happen again. But no, it's far from how it ended up. And Disney played a key part in this. And I have to give them their due. In many respects, they got behind Doctor Who as a brand. I think that they could have pushed the 60th specials more, but then again, they didn't pay for those. And they got them a couple of months later, didn't they? So or didn't know they got them at the time. But they did get those at the time. But I know that they weren't as invested in them and didn't push them anywhere near as heavily. But they did put some effort behind showcasing Doctor Who as a brand here. The Doctor Who collection was over on the Disney Plus app. And whilst I think that was probably quite an inexpensive thing to do, it did appear that they were keeping up their end of the bargain. I'm no fan of Disney, but if I'm to blame anybody for this shit show, I hate to say, but I think that the blame falls on the BBC for the most part. I think that's the image that we're left with after this time.
Yeah, and you can't deny, especially for the shooty stuff, like I said, because they weren't involved so much with the Tennant stuff. That first series of shooty, they gave him a big sort of press push. They did making the subway, the trains, all covered in Doctor Who. He did some big interviews in America. They had him on the circuit. They had even their own press events for Doctor Who with him there. So they definitely put their weight that way to try and sort of get eyes on the brand again, especially in America. And we've all sort of said, because of the Chibnall stuff and the stuff before that, if we're being honest a little bit, it was a very low profile thing in America, Doctor Who. So they needed to get sort of the klaxon back out that Doctor Who was back, in a sense.
Yeah, you're right. I know in America, obviously with BBC in America, especially with, during the Matt Smith era and the early part of the Capaldi era, was a juggernaut on BBC America. They were driving everything with special programming, repeats, everything. And that all collapsed during the Jodie era. I mean, absolute collapse. And so it's hard though when you have to start your rebranding effort with kind of rehabilitating the image, you have to say, oh no, please come back. It's better than it was. I mean, that's almost like starting behind the starting line. It's like you've got to make up. You've got to make up for past sins before you start moving forward. And that's always hard.
We tracked, didn't we? We tracked in real time the collapse of the Chris Chibnall-led production starring Jodie Whittaker over those weeks and months and years on Type 40. Initially with disbelief, then with kind of terror, and eventually, due to the adversarial tone that production team had taken with us, with relish as the entire thing went down in flames. But when it came to the Disney Plus and BBC Bad Wolf co-production, I genuinely wish them all the best. But of course, with this new alignment of so many different players, Sony in the mix as well, it was hard to read, to anticipate that which each component player in the game would have as their ideal outcome, what their expectations from being part of this deal actually would be, because they weren't going to be the same for everybody. And more importantly, they weren't going to be the traditional aims and outcomes that the BBC had always had, which was just to get as many eyes on BBC One during that 45, 50 minutes as possible, and to keep them there and to build on them week on week on week. It wasn't just about that anymore. We'd always been able to keep an eye on those figures and those metrics, but being on Disney Plus meant the potential audience for Doctor Who was far, far larger. We had heard the talk about the aims that Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner had creatively for it. Julie said that we want as many people to watch this as possible. This is a show for everyone. We're inviting everyone to this party. She was saying all the right things. But the material is what counts, isn't it? If the tune isn't one that people are willing to dance to, then you can say all the things you like. It's actions rather than words that count. Disney, for their part, and to be fair to them, they're a private business, just like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Apple. tend not to publish any metrics regarding their streaming platforms at all, and certainly not concerning each individual series. You may get something like a meme that boasts about screen time or views, and if something gets nominated for awards, they'll absolutely boast about that. But generally speaking, sort of who's watched it for how long, they'll keep those things to themselves. You might occasionally hear somebody saying, oh, this was the #1 show for the age group between 18 and 24, for example. They're very, very proud of things like that. And I think that's a good thing as well, to sort of look and to speak to people directly. But the simple way that we'd always measured how successful or not our series was always line go up, good, line go down, bad. That's all Doctor Who fans. That's all we want. Yeah. It's what we understand. More to the point, though, and this is the darker side to it, it has become that which we feel collectively we're entitled to know. And Disney Plus weren't playing that game, were they, Gary? They weren't going to play ball with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when the kind of the meteoric rise of YouTube, especially since
the commentator space,
back in 2020, because YouTube kind of became the destination place for people who couldn't go elsewhere for their usual entertainment. And the things, okay. And the things that drive
dissident voices, Gary, dissident voices.
Well, yes, I you go there. I'm not going to go with the descriptors, but they're driven by. They have to have fuel for the fire, and the thing that provides fuel is the hard numbers. Oh, hey, we got big exclusive news that it went up 18% or down it, or it lost 1 million or whatever. That's the fuel for a lot of the social media, the fire and discussion. And without that, it's hard.
Yeah, and
we're left to make it up.
On, like we said, traditional, it's all about just who watched it on the night. And then with streaming, it sort of morphs into something else. And another big thing is, and you hear lots of people who do talk about streaming say a big thing is how many people is it bringing to the service, that idea of how many subscribers are you getting, how many people are...
It's very collective, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of that more view. So I think...
You'll get the people talking that way on the stage at those expos like D23 for Disney, won't you? They'll speak in those terms.
Yeah, but we weren't getting that either. So I think it was the lack of any information, which was sort of making us go, we need something if you're not going to give us figures.
We took it personally, Charlotte. We did. I mean, nevertheless, someone, despite everything that we've just said, someone always knows. And this being Doctor Who, something eventually always leaks. Lately, it's been to this platform, Reddit. Reddit's becoming somewhat notorious as a platform, isn't it? It's like it's seen as the sort of the bottom feeder of social media platforms. I suppose because anybody who could possibly hold any opinion about anything whatsoever can be found on there, speaking largely unchecked, and it is kind of like the wild, wild west of e-conversation. Yes, I approach with caution whenever I hear anything that's come from Reddit. But on the other hand, there's been plenty that's come from the Reddit space, which has turned out to be true. And you have to judge. It's like how you judge a tabloid newspaper. You have to judge by the results. If more often than not it turns out to be true, then you'd be mad to discount it, I feel. And that is where this latest set of leaks has come from. Well, that's what we thought. It turns out that the people who've posted them to Reddit got them from Gallifrey Base, Gary. Now,
really,
I've been a member of Gallifrey Base for 20 odd years, but I think it has to be about 7 or 8 years since I last logged in. I went to check up on this to see what was going on. And not only did I find that my login didn't work anymore, but also found this massive warning here on their front page. Bigots go away. So you can see how tolerant they say we've attempted to hold tolerance with alternative viewpoints. And by that, they just mean perfectly reasonable opinions that those who aren't far lefty loonies hold. That's what they mean. So it then lurches into a big speech about identity politics and just lots of leftist buzzwords and things like that. So basically, if you're a bigot, go away. But they decide what is a bigot. And anyway, so this is why I remembered I stopped going to Gallifrey Base very quickly after I saw this graphic. But apparently, these leaks were originally put up on there, and Gallifrey Base removed them. Their editorial moderation team there removed these leaks. Now, I've been assured by multiple people that despite this attempt to silence, that these leaks and these metrics are legitimate, according to several people who've spoken to me. Figures, tables, metrics that are purporting to be from Disney Plus regarding the performance of Doctor Who between November 2023 right the way through to May of 2025. And the information has been sort of broken down in reasonably digestible chunks, I suppose. I mean, I think I can just look, if it's anything that people on staff at Disney Plus can look at and make sense of, I'm sure that we can manage, Charlotte, is what I've come to think. But it's just that when you see these graphics, this is what was shared over onto Reddit, you think, wow, that's a lot of data. Those are a lot of numbers. How on earth do you jump into all of that?
Yeah, when it's sort of that's almost like a wall that you have to just get through, isn't it, when you see that initially?
The truth is, I mean, these are, Gary, 4 weeks worth, the initial 4 weeks worth of figures built up by each individual episode of Doctor Who, screened between the November of 2023 and May 2025. So since that relationship, that production team had started screening episodes, all banded there with not just the title of each episode, but the streams themselves in minutes. That's how long each individual viewer had remained engaged with the material, I suppose, Gary, would be how I judge that. Okay. Streams in minutes, the duration of the actual episode they're running alongside it, and then a calculated number of views over that 4-week period.
You're more of a kind of numbers cruncher than I am, but on something like this, I would gravitate to, and this is just me, I would gravitate to the views, because that's like, okay, how many eyes were on it? I'm not sure. What do they use the stream minutes watched to tell? What does that indicate? Why is that an important metric, just like views is? What does that tell you?
I think Charlotte's got it bang on. Keeping people on the platform, Charlotte, like you said.
Yeah, and the thing is, with, if I'm right, with it when it comes to streaming, because you can choose whenever you stop watching something on a streaming device, whereas traditional TV, it's on for that set amount of time, it's scheduled, that's the slot, you can't mess around with it. A big thing with these sort of things is they look at when people drop off. So people might watch for 10 minutes, for example, and then drop, and then because they want you for the full duration of the show. That's it. That's like viewer attention. I've heard the term be said.
Retention, that's the word. Yeah.
And it's that. So they're scared to death of people not watching the whole thing, because then you're showing that you haven't got a strong enough sort of people that you know is going to come back next week. If they've dropped off halfway through your episode, they're not really gonna be chomping down the bit to watch the next one, are they? So I think that's a big thing with these figures as well.
So Charlotte, would you take like the total streaming minutes, divide it by the number of views, and that would tell you the average number of minutes that people watched that particular episode?
I think so. Like I said, this isn't my usual protocol, but I've heard a lot of people talk who are a lot more clever than me, and that's what they talk about.
No, you're quite right. My attention will always go to the calculated number just like you said, Gary. And obviously, this is over that 4-week total. So the equivalent of what would be the UK 28-day figure. So it's no overnights. These aren't the overnights equivalent of. They're not even a consolidated figure like a 7-day figure. These are the full first month. And when you see figures broken down like that, you think, okay, well, Disney will have known what their ideal outcome was. Just as you said, Charlotte, what would their target for retaining people be? What would their expectations be in line with other content? And you can see, I think, from looking at this, regardless of what we think about each individual number, it's clear that the Star Beast premiered with a degree of interest. That's pretty obvious. Which by the time we get to the giggle, is somewhat lessened, and even more so by the Church on Ruby Road. But once you get into the actual series, because obviously those specials, they weren't as heavily publicized by Disney Plus. But once you get to the stuff they actually did launch big with their new Doctor in the spring of 2024, with Shooter Gatwa and Mel Gibson out on a huge promotional tour all across America, if you remember, then you've got a really quite healthier figure again, back up, if not up to Star Beast level, certainly not far off. But you're quite right. I mean, when we look closer, though, we see there's a considerable drop-off for week 3 for Boom. You could think, well, what's so bad about that? Boom wasn't that bad, was it? But my attention is drawn to the fact that Boom followed the Devil's Cord. People largely there's a slight downward tick from Space Babies to Devil's Cord, but not much. The big drop is hello.
Hello.
Did you? Okay, that we've been flooded, everybody. So when did that cut out then?
Like 2 minutes ago.
No, not even that. Maybe not even 2 minutes, just about maybe a minute ago.
You started to say how you could look at Devil's Cord, and that seemed to be the big.
It must have been right away then.
Start.
It was Jinx Monsoon. We've been sniped by Jinx Monsoon. Okay, yes. So what do we make of that?
Well, I actually, if we can go back to the slide where you had, what I found interesting was that, and Charlotte, remind me, did the Christmas special that year, was that on Christmas night? The Goblins one? It was.
It was
okay.
The first one back at Christmas slot.
Okay, so the fact that what I think are pretty low view numbers for a Christmas special, first of all. But here's the one thing I find really interesting about Boom, because Boom, as opposed to the 3 previous episodes before it, got a lot more kind of unanimous praise than from fandom, from the public, than I remember the first 3 shooty episodes getting. But what you see then is, for the second week of Boom, the third week of Boom, the fourth week of Boom, those numbers keep dropping precipitously, even though I remember that as being one of the more higher praised episodes, but the viewing figures just like drop like a rock. That's weird to me.
They do, and they stay fairly down as well. There was a slight uptick for 73 yards, probably based on good reviews of Boom. I don't know, but gradually it does start to fall again as that series works its way through to a conclusion there, through Dot and Bubble, through Rogue, Legend of Ruby Sunday, and finally the Empire of Death resting significantly diminished from where it had been before. So whilst I wouldn't say that this tanked, you can track the dropping off of interest, even over 4 weeks.
You can almost see how there was almost something in every episode that got a group of fans, like a small chunk, to say, no, I've had enough, I'm not coming back. And you, like, with the Space Babies, I think it was the childishness and the tone of that opener. People were like, why are we having a comedy episode? Why are we having... Literally, your conclusion was the spaceship farted. Like, that's literally how that episode ended.
You know that I've got a lot of time for Space Babies. And I've spent nearly 2 years now sort of qualifying that. But I would argue, people blame Space Babies. People have been blaming Space Babies now since it's screened. I feel somewhat vindicated here. Although there is a drop between Space Babies and Devil's Cord, that's about what I would expect between an episode 1 and an episode 2 of anything. Realistically, it's not a big drop off, which would lend me, because I know a lot of people, normies, who had all the things that you've just said about Space Babies, which I know a lot of Doctor Who fans feel that way. Normies didn't feel that way. A lot of normies enjoyed that. They thought it was perfectly viable. The big drop off was after the Devil's Cord. I think
I'm not denying.
What I'm saying is, I said at the time, and I'm going to make sure that people know here that I've been proven right. I said at the time it was the Devil's Cord, not Space Babies, and to me, this proves me absolutely correct.
What I'm going to say is, I think it was the 1-2 punch.
Yes.
Of Space Babies and then Devil's Cord, which sort of made sure that if people had some issues with Space Babies, but they thought, I'll give it another go, they watched Devil's Cord and they were like, nope, after those 2 episodes, I'm not giving Russell any more of my time. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you could be right. But look at that by Empire of Death. You've got half the number of people that turned up for Space Babies. Less than half were still there just 8 weeks later, 7 weeks later, sorry, for Empire of Death. That's one hell of a tail off. Well, it's not tanking, but it's not far off.
To Charlotte's point, if you go back to the previous slide, the numbers prove exactly what Charlotte was saying, because if you look at the remembering that Space Babies Devil's Cord was like on a single night. Yeah. So even if you look at the first week, even if you look at the first number of the set of 4, we went like for 36 million minutes for Space Babies, then 30 million minutes for Devil's Cord. The very next week, it loses a third, down to 21 million minutes. That's a third lost between the double header of 1 and 2, and then Boom. And I think Charlotte's right. People were sampled. Oh, I'm going to give this new Doctor a try. And these days, especially with so many other options out there, you basically got a score right out of the gate, and people just didn't like what they saw to come back.
They scored, a big fat nothing. So it's not very impressive at all. And sure enough, I mean, when was that? Empire of Death, that would have been the June. It would, and so it was Christmas until Joy. Now, I said at the time that Joy to the World was very much the last chance for all new Doctor Who and for this entire sort of phase of Doctor Who's existence. And again, I feel that came true as well. But when they came back for Joy to the World, Christmas 2024, not only is it remains at roughly the same level of the people who lost interest by the end of season 1, but it's even less. And 3 months later, when season 2 premieres, again without the push that season 1 had, but a publicity drive nonetheless, we had Shooting Gatua and Varada Setu on top of the Empire State Building, didn't we? And on numerous TV shows, and yet the dwindling of interest sadly tapered off noticeably by the Robot Revolution. That was the first episode of season 2. No double bill this time. Whether they would have recovered for looks, or maybe we'll find out about that one day.
Also shocking in this slide that we're looking at here is, okay, the views for Rogue 922, which would have been like my last straw if I just been kind of a normal viewer of Rogue. But then you look at Ruby Sunday, the first part of the two-part finale. Part 1 gets 938, ends on a cliffhanger leading into the season finale, and it drops like 300,000 views. Nobody even bothers to turn up for the second part of what they just watched the first part of. That's really telling.
Word could have got around after 4 weeks as well, because obviously over a 4-week period, that kind of buzz and word of mouth, Charlotte, that eventually, I think that gives in within 2 or 3 days to a kind of, we all do it, or I've got to remember to catch that latest episode of whatever the show is that you're watching. And sometimes I think we're all aware of a show that we intended on watching all of, but that we lose interest in. And that, I think that's clearly what's happened for the broader audience on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and you've got to think as well, like, for example, on the BBC, they don't have all these big competing shows with each other nowadays. They did back in the day, but now they basically have, for each sort of telly season, one big thing. So at the moment it's Traitors for BBC. Before, like, that, it would have been a Strictly, like, during, like, just before Christmas, that sort of time period. But on streaming, you've got so much content, you've got so much stuff that you have to sort of shout to get your voice above that parapet. And
stay
if you just,
in the playlist, stay up on people.
And I think it's a harder job. I honestly do. In today's sort of atmosphere with streaming, you need to catch fire, and you need to be able to keep that fire every week, or you just disappear off the rotation.
It's a sorry state of affairs. I do have further information, which I'm not going to talk about just yet. We're going to hold that back for a little while. But I found this, I'm not a numbers person. I don't believe in poring over too many figures. I think you can, there are people out there, David Milling is a statistician, and he loves figures. And so for him, it's an idea of a good time looking at this kind of thing. But for me, it's something I have to be in the right frame of mind for, and so much of it I can't process. I have to really sit and think about what I'm looking at. But in this instance, it's quite digestible the way that it's broken.
An interesting thing I just noticed, because I'm looking at the views column, that's where I'm spending most of my time on these posts, that for Joy to the World, more than double the number of people who watched it on the night or / first week. That doubled in the second week, 135,000 views to 304. That bucked the trend of pretty much every other episode, where the vast majority of views were either on the night or the first week. And
could that be, Gary, people who simply have other things to do on Christmas Day and Boxing Day, and so over the holiday period, that entire fortnight, they catch up then? Let's take a look at, did that happen with Church on Ruby Road as well? No, it didn't. No, there was a lot of interest for, I wonder why that was. No, that's not a pattern with Church on Ruby Road.
Yeah, like I said, that the Joy of the World kind of breaks the pattern of all the other downward in each group. Weird. A constant downward.
Here's a guess, strange. And this is a complete and utter guess. That had Nicola, how do you say the actress's surname? And in America, she's quite well known now because of Bridgerton.
Oh, okay.
So maybe having her in that guest star spot actually helped it more in America than here. Because, like I said, the Americans absolutely adore Bridgerton because it's the period stuff, it's the British sort of
Right. Yeah.
aristocrat stuff, it's the dresses, it's all that. Like that, they absolutely adore that stuff. And like she was, I don't know if she's still in the show, but she was a big like star of that show.
It's the people who didn't prioritize Joy to the World immediately they're the ones. The losing of that proportion of interest is what accounts for the collected total of that being less than Empire of Death. It implies that there's no buzz around the show, or there's a lessened, a weakened buzz around the show. When you look at them, you put the first two figures together, comes out at say 440,000, which isn't that much, I suppose, away from the previous episodes, but it's enough to make that difference. And again, although the pattern does revert to the established pattern there for the season premiere, the Robot Revolution, it's generally speaking a very similar picture in the third and fourth week. So a gradual decay of the viewership that we're used to seeing in an equivalent way by looking at the overnights and consolidated figures on BBC One.
And also, it shows that for everybody who at the time and for every single week that both of these seasons were on, all the shouts of, well, no, overnights don't matter. It doesn't matter because you really got to do the +7s, the +28s. That's where all the real views go. And the fact that this chart then shows that no, week to week, there's an exponential erosion in the viewing figures, just shows that was just a lot of hot air for the most part.
Well, yeah, and we all said this at the time when the announcement happened to do with the Disney partnership, that it was so telling that Disney didn't say anything. Not even the usual sort of, when companies give out a statement, it's not really saying anything, it's lots of word salad and terms, and they do it because they have to, but there's nothing meaty there. I thought we would have at least gotten that from Disney when this officially was said, we're not doing it anymore. But the fact that BBC basically was the sole person talking, we all said at the time, it gives the impression that Disney is very much happy to be out the door. That's the impression it gave. And obviously we don't know if these figures are official because they've been leaked and they've been on Reddit. We have no way of knowing. But this would, and that's the word I would use, would be a very good reason, if true, why Disney were very happy to walk away, not make a statement, and just carry on with their day, was the impression they gave.
Funky still hasn't seen Joy to the World. But I think, again, that malaise that set in, even with the hardcore fan base, is, it does seem to be something that the general audience felt as well. And we've got lots of people in the live chat here that are chilling out with us who are sort of going over old grievances with the last couple of years' worth of each episode of Doctor Who, which I do completely understand. Little foibles, little things here and there. We're not going to go over old ground because we're chilled out. That's not really what we're here for. The whole era is an insult to our intelligence, according to I Am Your Servant. Of course, you're quite right. An insult to our intelligence and our final sort of resources of goodwill, I suppose. The second set of data that we have, this has not come from Reddit. This has been sent independently to Type 40. Is this. So this set of figures from our sources, we see here the total averages for each episode, but over a far longer period. Again, broken down into streams. Next to the duration. And again, that final column of the views, a combined graphic featuring all of season 1 again and those specials before and after it. We can go a little bit closer and take a look. So here we are. These are the 60th anniversary specials. Again, streams in minutes, duration per minutes, and then views.
You know what, for the clip for the segment that you're showing now, plus what the wider view that you showed in the last one, looking at this just as a purely, removing our, love for the franchise, putting that aside and just viewing these objectively as, not even, saying if this was any show, it didn't matter. You're just solely looking at the numbers. What this tells me is that that people tune in, that there's a lot of curiosity viewing going on here. Like for the Star Beast, the return of Tennant and Tate gets what it does. And then people, it's like, okay, been there, seen that. And then they lose 50% of the numbers for the next two. And then the curiosity viewing for Shudi's first episode brings it up again. And then I think on the one where the last one you showed, where the numbers after Church on Ruby Road for the season 1 numbers showed that, okay, people had their curiosity about Shudi satisfied, and then the numbers are already dropping. So it seems like there's no, I keep coming back to the retention word that Charlotte used. And of course, that was in context of Disney want retention, that people who watch Doctor Who on their channel stay for all of their other content. But just that aside, it just seems like the views now are, the Doctor Who really only gets views for the curiosity. Is it a new Doctor? Is it the return of a beloved Doctor? Week to week, it's gone. Because one of the numbers that you just had on the slide before this was like, one of the episodes was like at 40,000 or something. And it's like, that's just nothing.
Again, this is over a far greater period of time.
It's like it needs an event, doesn't it? Or it needs something outside of just a normal episode to get any attention now. That's the impression it gives anyway. Yeah,
look at Joy to the World. From year to year, from one Christmas, 156, which was the event, first episode of Shudi, a year later, it's a quarter of that.
I've got, let's go through them a bit. So what have I got next? Okay, so those are the specials. That initial crop of 4 specials, initially led by David Tennant and Catherine Tate, and then featuring the debuts of Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. Those are the longer range figures there, purported to be from Disney Plus themselves. Here is the equivalent for season 1. Again, over a greater period of time, streams per minute, duration in minutes, and a simple calculation of the number of views, the total views, and then the average view count for the entire season 1 of Doctor Who, from the late spring into early summer 2024, is there calculated at the bottom there was 1,604,227. Starting, as you've said, Gary, from that again, another initial high, Space Babies, The Devil's Chord. There's 1 million on each of those episodes before it drops for boom, that third.
Yeah.
And then just keeps dropping.
Yeah. So it does, again, goes up again a little for 73 yards, because boom, we said this at the time, boom was largely agreeable. It was recognizably Doctor Who. So the people who'd remained reasonably interested, they came back, and there might have been a little bit of word of mouth around that, because a lot of people were talking about that episode, but it wasn't enough to keep people there until the end. I mean, things didn't ever get as low as that again over this longer period of time. That's the Devil's Chord effect. The season finished with less than half the number of views than it had for how it started, and that's got to be a failure by anybody's standards, settling at that average figure of, let's say, 1.6 million views for an entire season. Now, obviously, Disney have never disclosed their ideals, their expectations, but they had to have been. Well, clearly, because they're not there anymore. But we'll come to the reasons for Disney's departure another time, because we're in possession of some more information about that. But this can't have been the figures that they were looking for, I feel, Charlotte, somehow.
No, especially as this was a new sort of thing they were doing by co-partnership with Doctor Who, and this was a brand that they hadn't really dipped their toe in yet. So when you've got this new brand and you've sort of been told or sold, sort of, oh, it's 60 plus years, it's sort of this big British thing, like it's really big, and then you get those viewing figures, possibly, then yeah, you're going to feel a bit let down, aren't you? I think that's the kind way to put it.
Yeah. Let's pop Joy to the World.
I think
at the
actually
bottom of there as well. And we've got the Joy to the World figure here, Gary, which just popped that into the bottom there. So let's substitute that total and average for Joy to the World and see where that lies. And here was what I found to be a very stark difference.
Yeah. Especially year to year. I mean, I think like if you do Christmas to Christmas, you're right. It's very stark. It's 1/4 of whether you go by streaming minutes or views. It's 1/4 of what they were getting a year before. Now, I just looking at these numbers, 3 things popped into my head that this kind of tells me. The first is that you can't take, even for a show with a dedicated fan base of whatever particular size, you can't take your audience for granted. You can't assume, oh, if they show up the first week, they'll be back every single week, or oh, Doctor Who fans will, no, we can rely on them every week. No, it's like in today's streaming environment, in today's viewing environment, you have to give, it's almost like on a week-to-week basis. It's like once people start getting disappointed, or you start doing something to actually make them turn away, they might be gone. So you cannot take them for granted in that they're always going to be there. Second is that I think the numbers from Boom to 7 to 3 yards, I think, first of all, that indicates that, the power of word of mouth. If you have an episode that on social media say, oh, this week was really good, this was much better than the first 2, like Boom, then the power of that will then translate into higher viewing figures, like for 7 to 3 yards. So while you can't take for audience for granted, if you give them what they like, word of mouth can be very powerful and actually can get you views. The other thing I'm wondering, and I'm really curious about what the both of your opinions on this, I wonder if basically this gives us indication of basically what the base floor of Doctor Who fans is. It's like, okay, we know what the base now of Doctor Who fans is, probably what, like 1.1, 1.2, or 1.5, whatever. I think we're looking at, no matter what, come hell or high water, the quality of the episode or not, this is the base number of Doctor Who fans.
Somewhere between 700,000 and what was the average figure from before? 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Somewhere between those 2 figures.
But what's stark there is by one series worth of material, you're already at the sub 1 million range.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, less episodes. This wasn't a 13 episode run. So it's taken quicker, in that sense, to get to that figure.
And on Christmas, too.
Yes, on a holiday.
I think I'd imagined being on a global streaming platform would be, they would expect to harvest a global yield. The potential reach, just as Julie Garden says, was colossal. We're looking at 1 million people. Tops, 1.5 million people, absolutely tops. I find it difficult to mean, and even the event status of specials. Here are all the specials grouped together, Gary. So you can see that difference there. 12 months between the Church on Ruby Road and Joy to the World. Obviously, there's a year's worth of accumulated views as well, built up in the meantime. But from 2.8 million views on Church on Ruby Road down to just 740,000 12 months later.
And here's the other thing. I think that if you look at Eccleston with Rose, and it was the first exposure of everybody to a new Doctor, and yeah, there was a curiosity factor, but the quality of what people were getting made the numbers for that entire season great. I mean, everybody loved it because what they were getting on a week-to-week basis was what they liked. It wasn't just that they were indulging their curiosity over one night. Same for Tennant. Tennant climbed, he was 3 seasons, and everybody came in because they liked, and Matt Smith, of course. But if people don't like or don't feel that this is to their taste after their first sampling of it, they're gone.
Yeah, and I think as well, you've got what you're talking about with an audience, which at that point had a lot of disappointments, a lot of feeling like they got pushed out and got told this isn't for you anymore. And I think that made it a lot easier. And I do not blame at all the fans who said, I'm going to give it a couple of episodes, and if it's not working, I'm gone. I think that sort of threshold of giving it a chance was so slim. And then they didn't help it by doing the interviews they did, both Russell and Shooty and other people part of the production team. It was like almost a team effort to, how can we make this the most awkward sort of start to a series for fans wanting to give it a chance?
Another reason why I think that a lot of fans gave it a chance at the beginning, but didn't stay with it, because I think a lot of fans' metrics were, if they retcon Timeless Children, that's going to be my metric. If they do that, I'll stay and give it a chance. But by 4 or 5 episodes in, by the time you get to past the specials and the first couple of Shooties things, when they realize, no, it's, I think that was everybody's, the line must be drawn here type of thing. And I think that translated into these numbers.
So what we've got up on screen are purported to be the total number of streams in minutes, alongside the duration of the episodes, and the total accumulated views for each special there that was broadcast, streamed, dropped, whatever you want to call it, during the whole BBC Studios, Bad Wolf and Disney Plus co-production. So if those are the figures for the specials, we've got the equivalent grouping together here. So there we are for the season 1 as well. All banded, added together for a total number of streamed minutes and a collective total of views across 8 episodes comes to 3.7 million views. But the average is still 1.85 billion views for that entire season. Again, falling some way close of just 2 million views on an international, a global streaming platform.
And with not a cheap show, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I'm curious, Dan, what was this is pure speculation I'm asking for on your part. Looking at these numbers, at what point, if you had to guess, would you say that Disney looked at the progression, whether it be 4 weeks for each episode or year to year, whatever we're doing, that Disney would say, okay, this was a nice try, but this just isn't sustaining, we're out? And what do you think would have been the kind of tipping point as far as the numbers go?
As far as the numbers go, I think it's very clear where the rot started to set in with the viewers, where the series lost a constituency of its potential viewership that it never got back. And for me, it's universally in exactly the same place as it was when it was screened on the BBC. And when you get those figures next to one another, when you compare Disney's 4-week figures next to the BBC's 4-week figures, or equivalent of, the numbers that we're looking at
Wow.
may be drastically different, but the pattern, the effect, is exactly the same. Starting with that high for the Star Beast, falling when the series premieres, and then positively tumbling once the Devil's Cord is screened.
Yeah, I keep coming. The thing that keeps striking me with all of the graphics you're putting up is not just the consistent fall, but that absolute stark drop between Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death. The fact that so many people would just choose not to tune into the second half of the season finale. That is just so telling for any show, not just this.
And when we're looking at the UK and the we've got the BBC One and the Disney Plus figures there side by side. That's the only real stark difference. In Britain, more people did come back for the finale.
Yeah.
But on Disney Plus, it was like, no, they were out, they were gone, and they didn't come back. They weren't coming back even for Christmas, whereas people did return to the show for Joy to the World on Christmas Day there, and for that 28-day period. 6.3. Joy to the World was, in terms of metrics, very successful for the BBC. On Christmas Day in Britain, it was something like the third watch programme on that entire day. But creatively, it was a huge failure, and it didn't have that restorative effect, as was proven by the premiere of season 2 just 3 or 4 months later. There, in fact, it was a far shorter window, wasn't it, between Joy to the World and Robot Revolution? So you can see how down that was. It's down to 4. It just kept tumbling and kept tumbling from that point on. So for me, this points very clearly at one creative decision that we were calling out a year before. It was even screened, I think, maybe even longer, and that people just aren't going to stick around for a show that doesn't reward their loyalty, doesn't value the viewer's time. You're not going to retain those people, Charlotte, just as you said, and it is largely down to a massive breakdown of Russell T Davies' professional faculties and the employing of drag queens, specifically one drag queen, as the main villain of a key episode for what was really the launch of this new era. People don't want drag queens anywhere near this brand under any circumstances whatsoever. Doctor Who is family entertainment. And whilst that is inclusive of adults, drag is not suitable entertainment for children, and drag queens are not appropriate casting choices or personalities to have in orbit of this brand and exposing their bile to the viewership.
When you look at those figures, I get what you mean. There is that big drop. You cannot deny that on both ends. The official BBC ones and these leaked are claimed to be figure ones. But like I said, I have to slightly disagree. I think it was the combination of those two episodes. I really do. Because I think they both touched a nerve in different ways with people who were willing to give Russell a go, who was willing to give this era a go.
I think we're talking. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think we're talking about the difference between Doctor Who fans and regular punters. I think that
Yeah,
the
I can
overwhelming,
see-
the universal factor is this person. And I accept that Jinx Monsoon is successful at what they do on the stage or whatever. And heaven knows, Monsoon can sing.
yes.
But this casting was sold to us not on those terms. It was as Jinx Monsoon, as an influencer, as a personality, as a star. If you follow that person over to their social media content, what you see is bile, extremely gratuitous sexual content and talk and behavior which is not suitable, remotely suitable, to be attached to the Doctor Who brand. Cast
Well-
because they were a friend of Russell T Davies and because of what appears to be a totally out of control fetish, which is dictating the creative direction of this show.
So I don't know about their personal stuff, but I can talk about the character. And I think the problem was the way they were written and characterized was incredibly
queen.
loud. Yes.
Yeah.
It was an incredibly loud, it was sort of abrasive, it was very in your face. And like and there was for me anyway, there was a lot of innuendo with the way the character was written as well.
Yep.
And I think those things, even if we're talking about general public again, they wouldn't know all that stuff with this actress. They would have just gone off the character on screen. And I think the character was written as Marmite. That's the way I felt at the time. You either were into this sort of character as being a villain and being on part of the show, or you watched it and went, what on earth is that character meant to be?
Well, I was happy to give credit where it was due at the time. I considered Monsoon's performance to be powerful and memorable in some respects, but that aside, being objective, but still on aggregate, completely inappropriate to be anywhere near Doctor Who.
I think also the other thing that those figures are showing is as soon as people have a bit of space in between showings, whether it's you've got your block with the specials, then you've got a bit of a break, then you've got Ruby Road.
Yeah.
You've got a break until Space Babies, and then you've got a break between Joy to the World and Robot. That's the killer, those breaks. Because people either, we said this, they lose interest, they find other things to watch, or they have more time to go, no, what actually did I just watch? What actually was in those scripts? What was the writing?
Right.
Why did Russell do that to some legacy characters? I think that the time was very much the enemy in these figures.
Yeah. If it's off your mental front burner, that's deadly. That's deadly because I mean, right now, I mean, these days we have exponentially more things vying for audience's attention, whether it's either on their phone or on their computer or on their television. You better bring your A game every week because people don't have are not willing to extend the patience for 8, 9, 10 episodes when there's dozens and dozens of other things competing for their attention. They're not.
Disney didn't hang around either, did they? I mean, that was it. 2 seasons, really. I mean, I don't count the 60th anniversary specials because they were being made anyway. They probably wouldn't have made these seasons in this form to that pattern if it hadn't have been for Disney Plus. We'll come to the reasons why Disney exited the deal and when on a future edition of Type 40 Live. I do have more to tell, but for now I think we will leave it there. But what a sorry state of affairs this is. It's all been so intense in just 2.5 years. A lot of screened Doctor Who, and yet very little of it memorable for the right reasons, I feel, Gary, and a punch-drunk fandom.
Yeah, I mean, it's disheartening. That's the only word for it. You know, for a franchise that all of us have held, you know, close to our heart for a good portion of our lives. It's nothing that I'll speak for myself. I don't revel in, dissecting, performing the autopsy, with these numbers. I don't, but it just shows that sometimes, like, it takes, how long did it take for like the real hard numbers here to counter a lot of the shouting that was happening at the time? It's like, oh no, the show's fine. Oh no, the 28-day numbers will be great. Oh no, you guys are just haters. And it's all the shouting. And sometimes it takes months and years for the true numbers to come and show all of that, just for the noise that it is.
Barracking and deflection. Really, isn't it, Charlotte? It's noise. It's to tune out, to interfere, I suppose, with the signal of people simply comparing their viewing experiences the way that we do when we talk in our friends groups or at school gates or down the pub. They went to extremes to stop us from turning to one another, recounting our viewing experiences, and sort of passing the word around that the show was shit.
Oh yeah, I think there was a lot of fans who had a lot of hope and a lot of want for this to work. So when you have that deep want, you can at times not quite see certain things in front of you. That's sort of, I think, one side of the fandom was doing that, and the other side was, I think, very much, they could see the figures, but they were just trying, like you said, to make a lot of noise. But even, I remember when we were covering it, I feel like it felt very quickly that noise was sort of not being effective, that you could just see this was not working. And even Russell's language and the way he carried himself, compare Russell launching Shooty in that initial run up to season 1 to how he did it season 2.
Yeah.
It was almost like a different man was on those red carpets and on those press junkets, and even more so when it was like, oh, we have to wait, sort of the comments he was giving about season 3 and whether Shooty was going to carry on. And you could just see in real time, I think, more than any other era, people in front of it trying to have a brave face, but having to accept that there were clearly issues, and they were just trying to sort of, like I said, say everything's fine, that whole meme, but it wasn't.
Bad Wolf left holding the baby as well. Bad Wolf Sony. It's damaged their reputation considerably after a string of hits. Internationally, I'd be surprised if they've got a reputation left, to tell you the truth. Shitagato obviously long gone. What was he advertising for Burberry over Christmas? I mean, I don't know. I can't stand the sight of this guy now. The association with him is obviously indelible. He will always be now Doctor Who to some people. I can accept that. But he's yet another mark on the franchise that's never really going to wash out. It's a sad reality. Thank you for sticking with us through all those facts and figures, everybody. We've got some comments here in the live chat. Stephen O'Neill says, don't put it past Russell T Davies to make this year's Christmas special a song and dance act. Yeah. Literally, I think even Russell T Davies wouldn't be, not after, I mean, you could tell by his demeanour on the red carpet last summer. I mean, he does seem to be getting over it now, due to the company he's keeping, perhaps, I don't know. He does seem to be getting over it now, but you could see that he was a man who was experiencing probably his first ever professional crisis. I don't think he'll take any gambles with the special. I've got some information about that as well. So don't expect anything too ridiculous in that before the curtain closes proper, or before the curtain closes proper. It's doors closed, curtains fall. I'm getting tired, Charlotte. I'm starting to talk even more nonsense than usual.
Well, but whatever he comes up with, it's going to be the most spectacular, amazing, surprising, unexpected thing we've ever seen.
Fans have taken more damaging punches recently than Rocky did against Ivan Drago in Rocky 4, according to Funky. I think you could be right. Tokenism over substance, declares Matthew Pounder in the live chat. You couldn't be more right. You couldn't be more right. What else is here? Oh yeah, people talk about Maestro. That was the villain played by Jinx Monsoon. Make the villain a true villain, a crazy man, dressed as a woman, just like in real life. Says Terrified Monk. I didn't say that. Terrified Monk said that. Good one, says Matthew. Which one's a good
Matthew.
one? I'll ruin. The stupid dance numbers tested us too. So again, this is the kind of thing that I mean, though, I am your servant. These are the things that each of us, some of us are going to have enjoyed that stuff and some of us won't. None of those things are deal breakers. But collectively, I think over the average season, Charlotte, you can screen things which some people feel more than others. And you can get away with it if the general vibe around the show is really inclusive and fun. I mean, properly inclusive. I mean, inclusive and fun, and it doesn't have to be intelligent, but it can't treat us like we're stupid either. And so all this stuff, I'm fine with all of that. I thought that was excruciating as well, but it wouldn't have been enough to make me not come back again. You know.
No, but it's that whole death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
You said that before.
Right.
You can only
Completely
sort
wrong.
of go, oh, I'll let them have that so many times, can't you? Like, we've all watched movies or shows that will go, okay, I get that's stupid, or I get why that's happened, but I've enjoyed something else. When you don't have that something else to sort of make you forget the stuff you don't like as much, that's your issue.
Yeah.
Stephen asks, why didn't they get a woman to play Maestro? It could have been very different, because it wouldn't have been as sexually exciting for key members of the production team to have done that. It's I'm afraid that it's as base as that. I didn't want to believe that at first 2 or 3 years ago either, but as it has turned out, it's very evidently the truth. Sexual gratification and fetishism have played a key part in determining the editorial direction of a family-orientated adventure series. It's
also
frigging
giving
wild.
jobs to your friends. That's a big thing with Russell currently, I think.
There's that too. I can accept that Jinx Monsoon is a creation in the same way that Dame Edna Everage was a creation of Barry Humphries. But they never put Dame Edna Everage in Doctor Who, did they? Yeah. And Dame Edna Everage never went on social media talking about obscene sexual acts, did they? So I think it's slightly different. What else is here? Thank you, everybody, for letting us I sort of got quite intense about all that. With the passage of time, it's starting to boil my piss because they're still not owning up to a lot of this, despite the overwhelming, unarguable failure. They're trying to sort of crawl out of the wreckage, and still over their shoulders, while they're licking their wounds, picking the bits of glass from their bodies, from the impact, they're still looking back, pointing back at the fans and saying, it's your fault. It's not Russell. It's your fucking fault. Decision after decision have compromised this show for years since you came back. I'm just glad. Yeah, just don't let the door hit you, mate.
Yeah, that's why I have nothing but trepidation about this Christmas special, for exactly the reason you just said.
Yes, and sure enough, you get to do it all again. It'll be here before we know it, Charlotte. The Christmas 2026 Doctor Who special. Mix it up yet again, Tom. Put a banger. Would you trust Tom Baker to choose something to pop on the jukebox? That would be to lighten the mood. I don't know. You think? Would you? It would
be something I've never heard of, but that I would instantly love.
At least we can laugh about it, can't we? Look, I'm all for people enjoying themselves, and whatever turns you on, it's fine by me. On your own dime, in your own time. But it cost us an entire era's worth of Doctor Who, which could have turned out differently. It could have turned out differently.